Howdy folks, it's your friend Dominic, and ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to have my own fishing show. So here it is. In today's episode, I'll be talking about frog fishing, and give you a couple of tips and tricks to hopefully put more fish in the boat or on the shore when you're throwing these incredibly versatile and explosive baits. Stay tuned, I know you're gonna love it. Thanks once again for tuning in. If you've been paying attention to my Instagram lately, I've been throwing the frog quite a bit. There's something to it that I just love. Last year, it seemed like I did a lot of smallmouth bass fishing with the spinning rod. This year, it's all casting gear, power fishing, and lately, the frog has been hot. And I want to share with you what I've been learning lately on the water, because out of the package, a lot of people struggle with the frog when it comes to hooking them, keeping them, putting them in the right place, using the right stuff, and I'm here to help you with that today. If you haven't fished with a frog, I absolutely love it. It is the bee's knees. I like a handful of a lot of things, but what's better than that? Handful of frogs, like I got right here. Ow, I just hooked myself. That wasn't that bad. Oh, I got a little bit of blood. That's my... One of the first pieces of advice that I have to share with you when it comes to frog fishing: use the right tools. If you're working on something around your house, you wouldn't want to use tools that only did the job kind of well. You'd want to use the tools that did the job the best way. Am I right? So when it comes to frog fishing, we're fishing in heavy cover. We're throwing this bait a lot of times in places where people don't even think about throwing it, in the real scummy stuff, on the heaviest mats, deep into the backs of grass pockets. You know, anywhere there's water and really thick vegetation that you can put this frog in, you will be surprised where bass will find themselves living. And because you're in heavy cover, and even when guys use the term sparse cover, you need something heavy. That is why I use a heavy, fast, 7-foot 6-inch Abu Garcia Vendetta. I like this rod a lot. It's pretty light. It's very strong. It helps me deliver excellent hook sets. The rod, half the battle. The line you're using, braid, braid, braid. Don't forget that, because this braid is strong. It doesn't stretch. You're going to get those real good hook sets. And if that fish, you know, for some reason swims around some grass or lily pads, your line's not going to break. And when you're bringing them in, sometimes this line will cut right through the lilies or the grass, and it'll eliminate the ball of grass you got to bring in. It's just it's just a part that comes with frog fishing. You know, you're going to bring in a lot of vegetation sometimes. You know, you're fishing around the thick stuff. Use the braid so that you get really good hook sets, you keep them pinned, and you've got a fighting chance against the elements where you're pulling these fish out of. The reel I've got on here, you just need a fast bait casting outfit. This is a 7.1-to-1. Every time I reel it, it brings in over 30 inches of drag. And when you're frog fishing, a lot of the times you're using, you know, the rod to move the bait most of the time, and you're using the reel to pick up the slack. I like to keep it mixed. Maybe 50% rod action, 50% me reeling it in. Keep it nice and subtle, you know, whatever works for you. So tip number 1, use the right equipment. Use a heavy. You can get away with a medium heavy, but I don't really recommend it. Get yourself a heavy, get yourself a nice meat stick, get a broom handle like this one here, throw it into the scummy stuff. You got the braid, pull them out. You got the reel to keep up with the action of the frog and pull that fish out as quick as you can. Use the proper tools and you'll put more fish in the live well. Tip number 2 I got for you today. A lot of people, when they see an explosive bite and they're fishing topwater, their instant reaction is to swing that rod. That's rookie stuff. You know, you have to let that fish take it for a second before you give it to them. And it took me a while to learn that, but also, when these fish are coming up and feeding on the frogs, they're ram suction feeding it. So they're trying to suck it in, and they're trying to ram it to stun it. So allow the fish an extra second or two before you really give them the beans on that. Another thing that I was once struggling with when it came to frog fishing was, say I cast out there and I get a bite. and I want to reel up that slack a little bit before I give it to him, because you know sometimes when you're frog fishing, there's a little bit of slack in the line, and I was getting hypersensitive about missing my fish. So I had this reaction to reel 2 or 3 times before I set the hook, and I was weaseling that frog right out of their mouth. And I was thinking about it, and I was wondering, why do bad things happen to good people? And sooner or later it dawned on me. Because we're fishing with high-speed reels, every revolution I bring about, there's 30 inches. You do 2 or 3 of those, that's a considerable distance where, you know, you're either pulling that frog out of the fish's mouth or you're pulling the fish a little bit and resulting in ripping the bait out of the fish's mouth. What I do when I get that hook and say this is the paddle that my hand's on and I get a strike, I'm just going to do maybe 1 1.25 turns. Just bring in all the slack you have, not too much. You don't want to pull on it a whole ton. When you set that hook, that'll drive it to them. That gives you enough time to where that fish has hit it and sucked it in the back of their throat. Because once you become real good at this, your hookup ratio going to go up tremendously. Do one round like that, set the hook, perfection at its finest. You're not going to worry about over-reeling it and ripping it out of their mouth. So, tip number 2 I got for you, don't over-reel it. Don't be a little gun shy. You know, don't jump it a little bit and have that bait come flinging at you. Let them take it, give them 1 spin, and then sock it to them. Before I get into tip number 3, I'm going to share with you a couple of the frogs that I really, really like. Traditionally, I've always been a booyah frog type of guy. This is the Pad Crasher. Been using them for a while. They're real good frogs. I also like this booyah toad runner. If you know me, I love fishing buzzbaits. This toad runner, it's a mix between a frog and a buzzbait. It's got this boot behind it, churns up the water. You can fish it in real scummy areas and not have to worry about, you know, getting hooked up or gunked. You could throw this in places you wouldn't normally be able to throw a buzzbait. But sometimes, you know, this little paddle throws them off, and I'll explain that in a little bit later. But here's another frog I like. This is a Terminator. What I like about the Terminator compared to the booyah, the hook points are up quite a bit more. But we have a rounded top of the body, so when you're fishing it, you know, this is a wider, big-bodied frog. You know, this frog has really, really good hookup ratios. It's got really good points. While the booyahs are traditionally more in line with the body of the frog itself. And that's what brings me into tip number 3. So, a lot of guys, they get out the pliers and they have the habit of wanting to bend these hooks up just a little bit. You can do that if you want, but I don't necessarily recommend it, because a lot of the times where I'm throwing it, in the situations I am, you know, those hook points that might be just a couple of degrees up, they catch a lot of grass and a lot of scum. You know, it doesn't look like much, but I bent up, you know, one of these hooks on this toad runner a couple years ago, and it still catches fish, but it catches a lot more grass because of it. With the pliers, I say keep the pliers away and learn how to adjust your hook set accordingly. These baits will work outside of the package. You don't need to boil them. You don't need to bend the hooks. But honestly, do what you want. I'm not your dad. I can't tell you what you can and can't do. Fish the frog, bend the hooks if you want, but if you do bend the hooks, prepare for your bait to be caught up sometimes halfway through your cast, and that just gets so annoying. I decide, you know, totally avoid that headache. It was getting me pretty angry the other day, but we're not going to go there. You don't like me when I'm angry. And I know I just said that these baits work out of the package, and they do work well out of the package, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to modify them at all. If we look at the skirts on these booyah pad crashers, they're 3.5, 4 inches long easily. I've noticed when you're throwing a frog like this, it seems like maybe a third of the time they don't hit the body, they hit the skirt and pull it down, and you can't get a hookup with them unless they actually hit the body. So my rule of thumb, I trim the skirt just maybe 2 inches, just like that. Let's do a little demonstration right here. I've got this leopard frog right here, and we're going to do something called the rule of thumb. I'm going to put my thumb up to the frog here, and I'm going to go about halfway down my thumb. You know, my thumb might be bigger than yours, but use your thumb as a reference point. Hold it right there, and I'm going to want to cut it about right there, about a little more than the halfway mark closer to the body. So we have the halfway mark roughly. We're going to go a little bit closer, and what we're going to do is just snip it off just like that. And that was just one move I did to this bait that's going to get me a lot more hookups. I thought, you know, this wouldn't have been such a crucial game changer, but in all reality, you know, if it's just not happening, it's just not happening. It gives them less to hone in on. They see that body, they know that's how they're going for it. When they've got, you know, all these skirts hanging down in front of them, they take them as the frog legs, as they're going to be able to pull it down and crunch on them and suck it in. This way, when they blow up on it, they hit the body, they hit those hook points, and it's game over. I made that change to this frog not too long ago. Game changer. I know it looks a little doofy. This is a Terminator frog. I like it a lot. Been catching some good fish with it. Trim the skirt. It's got that body. You know, it's the action of the body that brings them in. But if you eliminate the trouble of the skirt, less for them to grab, and it's more of an opportunity for them to bite down on those hooks, and you're swinging on them, put them in the boat, bringing them on shore. The good stuff. You know how it is. And to close things off, tip number 4 I got for you. Be conscientious of how the fish are hitting your bait. I get in these moods. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm like me, so I'm going to share a little bit about myself. I get in frog fishing moods where the only thing I want to throw for a few hours or maybe even an entire day sometimes is the frog. If I'm throwing a frog and nothing really happens for a while, I'm going to change it up to a different frog. And recently I've come to realize that with this Booyah Pad Crasher, they're either on it or they're not. With this back little boot tail flapping along, churning up the surface, sometimes that's a little too much for them. Other times they see that and go like, "Ooh, I like that stuff," and they're all over it. The other day I was out, I threw this for an hour and a half, and I caught one that I don't know if it must have been a fluke, but I put it right on top of his nose and he instantly hit it before I retrieved it in. Sometimes the paddling action on these toad runners, it freaks him out, and you got to dial it back a little bit. So I tied on this Terminator. It's just got the big body, short little skirty legs to it. I caught 3 within the next 15 minutes by making a subtle change. Now, if you want to fish your frog a little bit slower, maybe call them in. Say you got a cold front coming. Use a popping frog. You know, scoot it across the surface, let it pause a little bit. You know, sometimes they don't care if it's a popping frog, a walking frog, or a buzzing frog like the toad runner here. Play with it, because if you make the subtle changes on the water when you're doing this, you're going to get better hookups, you're going to get more fish in the boat. You know, just be thinking about it. You're gonna know when something hits your bait. Maybe they're just nipping at the back of the tail. And with this toad runner, that has happened to me quite a bit. Sometimes they'll rip the entire tail off, and they give you replacements with them when you purchase them too. If you're not getting one on one frog, think about where you're putting it. If you know there's fish around there and you've caught them on the frog before, play with how you're frog fishing them. Maybe use a popping frog, slow it down a little bit. Maybe use something that doesn't have a tail on the back, just something that scoots over the water, like this Booyah Pad Crasher or this Terminator. Think about how those fish are hitting your frog and be really active about it. Watch your bait scoot through the water as you're bringing it in. You'll see bluegills or bass come up and either hit it and miss it, nip at the tail, or just swallow it, and you're going to give it to them. All right. So if we want to recap on the 4 tips I shared with you today, number 1, use the right equipment. Heavy rod, strong braid, fast reel. That'll help get things done. Setting the hook, don't over reel it. Don't be a little gun shy. Let them take it. You got to have patience. That's a real big factor to it. Number 3, be a little cautious about bending your hooks because they catch a lot of weeds sometimes, and I don't really see the hookup difference. But when it comes to bait modifications, don't be afraid to trim your skirt. And last of all, make sure you're conscientious of how the fish are hitting your bait. And this is obviously going to go day to day. Play it up, play with different frogs. When you make a small change especially when it comes to topwater fishing, it can be game over. And I want you to have really good days on the water. I want you to hop in the comment section and tell me, do you like fishing with the frog? Do you have a favorite frog? Do you hate the frog? I don't blame you if you do. For the longest time, I didn't like frog fishing. Recently, I've been on a largemouth kick. I gotta say I love it. It's awesome. I love the way we fish for largemouth up here in Michigan. It's a lot of fun. I do a lot of fishing in grass and heavy vegetation. The frog, they blow up on it. You hook them in the back of the throat. It is the bee's knees. But that's it for the frog fishing tips, folks. I gotta say, I really appreciate you tuning in this week. Be sure, come back. I got another episode coming out really soon here where we're going to be rigging for flathead catfish. There's a little sneak peek of the rod I got going on. That's my whisker seeker. That's my baby right there. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Got a lot more content coming for y'all. Until next time, I'm Dominic, and thanks for watching.